Hi, everyone. Allison Skaberg here tonight with ADDA-SR Fort Bend County. Tonight, we are super excited to have Sydney Zuiker with us with Crime Stoppers on a very important topic that I think that we need to hear more of. If you guys are just joining us tonight for the first time, our support group is here for parents with children with ADHD. We seem to have a lot of parents with other similar conditions or similar executive function deficits. So we're glad you're here. We used to meet face to face prior to, I guess, like the rest of the world prior to COVID, and we switched over to Zoom with COVID, and I guess that's kind of our path forward for a while. So tonight, before I turn everything over to Sydney, typically, our meetings are the last Tuesday of every month. We have a different speaker every month that talks about important topics relating to parenting kids with ADHD. It could be topics from medicine, new diagnosis, just all kinds of different topics. So we try for it to be just a meaningful meeting that'll last about an hour, and you can basically put any questions that you have in the chat box. We strive to answer as many questions as we can. We typically do not meet during the summer, and that has been historically, our group has met the last Tuesday of every month and has not met in the summer months. And I have a couple of polls, just 2 polls. I wanted to get some feedback from some of the other parents that are out there on whether or not we want to meet during the summer or not, or take a break. It's relatively easy to do these sessions by Zoom. You're at home, you're not packing up kids or anything like that. So I'm going to launch this poll. If you'll just check your screen and answer answer this, that will be great. And then I'll have one more poll after that. I'm going to give about maybe 10 more seconds. Okay, so it says basically the 83% continue meetings through Zoom, so that we don't want to take our summer break, and that's kind of what we were thinking, but we just really wanted to get feedback from the parents on that. And then our second question is, what additional topics would you guys like to see? And if you have some additional topics that are maybe like not in the boxes here, you can put that in the chat box as well. So as we're scheduling additional meetings going forward, we're interested in the topics that you might be interested in, or also we are also open to learning about other topics that that maybe you have heard that have been great. So if there's something here that you want that you don't see, definitely put that in the chat box for us. Okay, so I'm going to end this poll. And basically, we have post-high school options for ADHD. That is a good one. And I was thinking that might be a good one. Talking about even accommodations. Where do we go from here if there's kind of an interim before a university or something like that? And then I've got 67% for the Texas Workforce Commission vocational rehab. SSI and Medicaid. Okay, so I've got Meredith here. Meredith Haynes is part of my team, and we're glad to have her here tonight. She will be taking over for me because I'm going to have to step out. I have another meeting, unfortunately, that I have to step out to. But we're super excited that you're here. Thanks for being here. I see a lot of familiar names out there that we see on a pretty regular basis, and we're glad you're here. And we are truly an organization of support, and we want to be here for you. And we know that there's been a lot of challenges through the pandemic, and just a lot of changes in our lives overall. So we're glad you're here to get some advice and tips. And so, Sydney, I am going to turn it right over to you, and I think that you can share your screen.
Awesome. Okay. Yes. Hi, my name's Sydney Zuiker. I'm going to share my screen really fast. Give me just a second. It's thinking. Hold on. Okay, it should be full screen for you now, so I hope it looks correct. Again, my name's Sydney Zuiker. I'm the Safe Community Program Manager at Crime Stoppers of Houston and the executive producer of our podcast, The Balanced Voice. Throughout my presentation, if you have questions or comments or anything, you can put them in either the QA or the chat, and I'll try to monitor them. But if I'm not seeing them, Meredith, please feel free to just interrupt me and I'll answer whatever questions come to mind, and we'll leave a little bit of time at the end for questions as well. So like I said, I work for Crime Stoppers, and what we do at Crime Stoppers is we solve and prevent serious crime in partnership with all different kinds of people. We've been around for 40 years, and our first and primary focus was our tip line, which is the totally anonymous reporting system that people can call and report felony level crimes. So like homicide or aggravated assault, things like that. And then in about 2013, we looked at our mission, which had solve and prevent, and we decided that we needed to beef up our prevention programming. So the idea for our 2 prevention programs was born. We have our Safe School Institute that focuses solely on educating students ages pre-K through 12th grade and school staff about all different kinds of safety topics, ways for them to stay safe in an age-appropriate manner, and talking about, you know, the things that they're experiencing in their lives every day in ways that are relatable to them. And then we have the Safe Community Program, which is the program that I oversee. And we focus on all things adults. So parents, community members, law enforcement, college kids, anyone that might be interested and is an adult person. We work closely with victims. Our victim services department is an arm of our Safe Community Program. And so we do a lot of things. We educate on about 22 different public safety topics. And today we're going to talk about just one. However, if something that I say sparks a question that might not be fully about that topic, I'm sure I know something about it, so please feel free to ask it and I'll answer in any way that I can. If you ever want to utilize our tip line, there's 3 ways to do so. You can call, you can download our app, or you can go to our website. And if you'd like to learn more information about our tip line, you can go to our website, crime-stoppers.org. There's so much information there. I'm going to kind of skip past some of these next slides just so that we get to our presentation, because there's a lot to be said. So today we're really talking about, I know it says teen dating violence, but we're really talking about health overall, dating, safety. We'll get a little bit into sexual misconduct and just some things that you should be aware of. But really, we're going to talk about how do we create and even encourage healthy relationships. So let's start by defining what teen dating violence is. Teen dating violence is the physical, psychological, emotional, or sexual violence that occurs within a dating relationship. It can be in person, it can be electronically, and it can be with a current or former dating partner. So there's a lot of components to that definition. First, I want to point out is the electronically. We see a lot of electronic violence, electronic abuse occur. We're going to define that even further as we go through the presentation, but we have to remember that a lot of communication, a lot of a relationship with our teens is built via electronic means. Okay. Current or former dating partners is the next piece that gets kind of tricky, especially for students. When we're talking to students about relational safety, they sometimes forget that just because you've broken up with someone doesn't mean that that person's no longer abusive to you. We see some red flags there. You can even be charged with dating violence, relational violence as a former dating partner. So it's important to remember that. So when we present on this topic to students, we don't present it in the same format or the same way that we're presenting it to you today. However, we do ask this question. How many relationships on average will a person go through before they're united for life or married to someone, kind of find their forever person? And we love to ask students how many people they think. And we get a range of things. We get 1, we get 50, 100, 500, whatever. And it's always so interesting to hear what they have to say. The number, according to a study done by the people below, are 5 to 6. And this is, if you read the study, it's interesting how they define a relationship, a committed relationship where it's been kind of expressed that, you're in kind of a monogamous relationship. Now, students like to argue, well, if you're talking to someone, that means you're in a relationship. So, what they consider a dating relationship might not be what we consider a dating relationship. Now, the next little fun question we ask is, how many people will someone kiss before they find their forever person? And this one gets even more exciting than the first question. Hundreds, 5. Then they kind of like poke fun at each other sometimes. So the number here is 22 to 25, which seems high to me. It seems like a lot of people, but it's fun to see their response. Okay, so let's talk about the facts, understanding the facts. When we're communicating with students, when we're helping shape, what is a healthy relationship, it's really important to define some of these things. Relationships take time. I often see young people jump into relationships quickly. They meet someone, they're really interested in them. They're kind of that classic head over heels for somebody, and they kind of dive head first into the relationship without fully thinking about, maybe the consequences of the relationship or getting to know that person over a longer period of time. The next thing is that abusive relationships can sneak up on you. Often, kind of people put their best foot forward when they're first engaging with someone in a potential dating relationship. People want to present themselves in their best light. And sometimes that's the person that you think you're signing up to date. That's who our teens think they're signing up to date. And then over time, we can see unhealthy behaviors kind of arise. And if they go unaddressed, it can quickly turn abusive. Letting kids know that, letting teens know, hey, you might not have seen the red flags at the beginning. Maybe there weren't any. And, the abuse in the relationship can kind of happen quickly. I think helps sometimes when we're talking to students, it helps them feel less bad for being in this relationship. Sometimes we see that happen. Like they feel like they should have known. And just saying, hey, you might not have known at the beginning. Jealousy is a normal emotion. This one is huge. Everyone feels jealous at some point in their life. It's really just how you respond to that jealousy. Again, when we're talking to students, we talk about what are healthy ways to express your jealousy and what are unhealthy ways. We'll say, communicating those feelings. Hey, why are you feeling that way? Hey, what made you feel that feeling of jealousy? And then defining for them what would be unhealthy or even inappropriate behaviors to have because of jealousy. I often tell this story of, so when I first Crime Stoppers, I started as a school presenter. So I was in schools all day, every day. I would present, 60 presentations in a month at least. And, it would be multiple in a day, 6 to 10 in a day. That's a lot. And there were a lot of days where I would be in high schools and I would wear, a t-shirt, like similar to this, maybe like jeans, a backpack with all my computer and everything in it. And the other high schoolers wouldn't really notice that I was different than them, right? And so I would get to observe a lot. One day I was at this one high school and all day I'd seen this couple coming through the hallways all day. And they were the couple that was kind of like always touching each other, always really close to each other. And I just was noticing them. And then between one class period, I noticed that all of a sudden the guy in the relationship was pushed all the way against his locker. And the girl was like real close, like maybe this close to his face, like yelling at him. And so I listened, what's going on? And apparently she'd walked by his class during the last class period and saw him face towards this other girl in class and doing something. And she tried to text him and he didn't respond. And she was really jealous, is what I could gather. His side of the story was, yeah, we were assigned partners. I couldn't do anything about it. And I sit on the front class, and if I would have responded to your text message, I would have gotten my phone taken away. I would have gotten in big trouble. Okay. She's yelling at him and he's just like, oh, okay. I use that example often with students to say, is that a healthy or an unhealthy way of channeling your jealousy or communicating your jealousy? And they're like, unhealthy. And I'm like, okay, well, who has ever kind of assumed something because you're feeling jealous? Often a lot. We like to kind of role play with students and work through some of those scenarios so that they can start identifying what's healthy and unhealthy responses in various situations. So many victim cases are due to false reality of who someone really is. So we see a lot of cases where maybe a student met someone online and they think that they are an age that they're not, or a person that they're not. We see a lot of older people kind of trying to be in relationships with younger people starting online. It's pretty common. It is possible to be sexually assaulted by someone you're dating. There's a big misconception amongst our teens that once you're dating, you can't be sexually assaulted by this person. And we kind of have to explain that just because you're dating doesn't mean that you owe that person anything, that you're required to engage in any kind of sexual behavior with that person. And that person still needs consent every time for every action. You're protected at school against perpetrators. A lot of kids don't know this. They don't know of something called Title IX. They don't know that if one of their classmates harms them, abuses them in some way, especially sexually, that their school must separate them. They should not be in classes together. They should not have the same lunch, that kind of thing. But in order for a school to know that, you have to inform the school. The school isn't always going to just necessarily know. That's when students get a little easy. They feel like, I don't want my school to know my business. And I understand that, but also informing the school can help kind of keep that student safe and feeling comfortable at school. So here are some statistics. 1 in 11 females reported having experienced physical dating violence in the last year. These are high school students, okay? 1 in 9 females reported having experienced sexual dating violence in the last year. 1 in 36 males reported having experienced sexual dating violence in the last year. And 1 in 15 males reported having experienced physical dating violence in the last year. And this is by a study done by the CDC on teen dating violence specifically. So what does this look like on a little bit of a larger scale? So there are 8.5 women and 4 million men who report experiencing abuse in their lifetime. Okay, so this can be a variety of different kinds of abuse. But however, 3.5 million women and 900,000 men report that abuse to have occurred before they turned 18. This is really important. This has a lot to do with developmental factors of humans. And so simply age is a risk factor. Simply that they are a young person makes them more vulnerable. And it doesn't, I'm not saying that to scare everyone or to make you feel like, oh my gosh, I have to keep them in a bubble, but more to bring awareness to that and to say, you know, simply being aware that you are more vulnerable as a young person can be a protective factor in itself. Females who've experienced abuse are 5 times more likely to attempt suicide. This is really eye-opening to me every time I read that statistic, every time this is brought up. This just goes to show that we need to address these things. They can't go unaddressed. They can't just be stuffed down. And so if your child experiences abuse, it's important to get them the care and help that they need, the support that they need, and to make sure that they're talking about it and we're looking for any warning signs of mental health struggles or suicide or anything like that. 52% of women and 17% of men who have experienced abuse reported signs of PTSD. Again, another reason to seek the help that's needed. I always like to say, you don't have to have all the answers, but you have to help advocate until someone can help you with the answers. I talk to tons of parents, like thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands at this point in my life. And I think the biggest thing that I see from parents is that they feel like, I don't know all the answers. Whatever topic I'm talking about, doesn't matter what topic I'm talking about. How do I keep up is always the question. How do I keep up? What do I do if I don't know all the answers? And the response really is you don't have to know all the answers. You have to know where to ask someone to help. So I'm here to help. You're already in a support group that's here to help. Schools have a lot of resources to help as well. If you feel like you're asking questions, you're not getting the responses that you need and your child needs, please feel free to reach out to me. And we have a list of 250 community partners that I make sure are going to be helpful if you're in stress or need. So I will give my email at the end if you ever want to reach out to me directly. 40% of female homicide victims in the US are killed by intimate partners, and a lot of intimate partner violence starts at a young age. 25% of female abuse survivors reported missing at least a day of school due to the abuse. Okay, think about it. If we are going back to talking about Title IX and that law that says that schools must help, again, if that school doesn't know anything about it, they can't help. Okay, so we see a lot of young girls typically say, well, I didn't want them to know, so I didn't say anything, so I just didn't go to school. We have to talk about this. We have to talk about how there is a piece of law that says that the school must help, and things that can be done, steps that can be taken to make sure that they're safe. Because think about it, if someone who sits next to you in math abused you over the weekend, you don't want to go sit in math class with them on Monday. Okay, it can be scary, it can be traumatizing. So making students aware that exists. 17% of male abuse survivors reported missing at least a day of school due to abuse. Okay, so of teens that were abused, only abused in some way, only 33% told somebody. Only 33%, okay? That's small in itself. Now, of that 33%, 75% of those people who spoke up told a friend, okay? When we ask students, why would you tell a friend and not an adult, a parent, a authority figure of some kind, the police, they say, because parents and adults are going to make it a big deal and they don't get it, okay? They say, my friends understand, they're going to let me tell them, I'm going to get it off my chest, but they're not going to make it a huge deal, okay? 6%, 33% who spoke up, told a family member. Typically, that's like a sibling who they tell, though, okay? It's not often a parent. And then 3% told an authority figure, okay? That's really small. Now, I think that it's important that we encourage students to speak up and talk about things that have happened so that we can help them for themselves. However, it's also important to remind students that, hey, people who abuse likely abuse again. Okay. On average, someone who rapes someone will rape at least 6 other people in their lifetime. Okay. So talking about it's for you, it's for the safety of our community, it's for the safety of other students. We worked with numerous victims who found their inner strength to speak up once they found out that their abuser had abused someone else. And they say, if I would have spoken up sooner, like maybe that wouldn't have happened. And we can't know that for sure, but it is something to just keep in mind. So here are a few risk factors. I hate giving risk factors without saying there are ways to protect against some of these risk factors, but it is important to identify risk factors so that you can work on ways to kind of counterbalance this. Age, we already talked about age in itself as a risk factor. Exposure to dating violence, whether that be amongst friends. If your child has friends who have experienced dating violence in some way, they could think, oh, this is just how teen relationships are. Teens are just emotional. And so this is just how we treat each other. Maybe exposure to dating violence at home or in a family relationship. Again, they could think this is just how relationships are. If they're living with depression or anxiety or any other mental health struggle, this can be a risk factor for a lot of reasons. There are simple reasons like maybe they're just trying to deal with that component of their life and they don't have the energy maybe even to identify that they're in an unhealthy or an abusive relationship, or they have identified it, but it seems even scarier to do something about it. Okay. We see situations with teens, especially who have depression or anxiety, who at least feel like they have someone to lean on at school when they're dating someone, even if it's abusive. Well, like they'll say things like, oh, well, I have anxiety when I go to school and I know that this person's not great to me, but at least I know what it's going to be like when I go to school. There's going to be someone there that I can talk to that will the hallway. And that's the reason that they stay in that relationship. Substance use. Substances affect a child's brain in a more drastic way than they affect an adult's brain. And when someone, especially a child, is under the influence of anything, their thought process, their mind, their reasoning is impaired. And so this can lead over time to a more volatile, a more abusive type relationship. Belief in strict gender roles can be a point of risk factor here. If you think that everything should be one way or supposed to be one way, we do see kind of more abuse occur in those kinds of relationships instead of understanding that, hey, people are different, relationships are all different, that kind of thing. So now let's go through what a healthy relationship looks like, what an unhealthy relationship looks like, and then what an abusive relationship looks like. These are great to have solidly defined with your students, even if it's just like, hey, what would you consider a healthy relationship to be? And starting that dialogue with them and then say, okay, and then what would be some unhealthy behaviors, or what would be kind of a questionable relationship, and how could you work on those things? And then say, okay, and what would you define as abuse? These are all conversation starters that can really help that your student, your teen, reason through things for themselves. If they've never even thought about it, then they might not even be able to identify these different kinds of relationships in their own life or in people around them's lives, right? Teens are sometimes biggest advocates for each other. They might be able to say something to their best friend that their best friend's parents can't say to them. Okay, so even teaching them to look out for each other. So a healthy relationship is where decisions are made together and you can speak to each other. You're happy spending time together as well as apart. There's compromise and commitment. Okay, so it's balanced. Again, when we talk to students, we kind of do the scale like this. It's balanced. You get to be your person, they get to be their person. You still have your own friends and your own interests and your own hobbies, and so do they, but then you also like spending time together. You don't have to agree on everything. You don't have to always be happy and never fight, never have a disagreement or a point of conflict, but you are respectful of each other, you listen to each other, and you can compromise on things. An unhealthy relationship is where one person tries to make most of the decisions. They pressure you into any sexual activity and force you to spend less time with your friends and family. So what we like to say is an unhealthy relationship can simply be lazy behaviors. It can be, okay, we've gone from a healthy situation to maybe some of our own personal quirks or not the best parts of us start coming out, and we're not thinking as much about how do we compromise, how do we communicate in a healthy way. And then it can get even as severe as pressuring a bit. what we say to students is, if you, at this point, when you identify unhealthy behaviors in your relationship, if you can have an honest conversation with the person that you are in this relationship with, and they're willing to work on them and say, I hadn't thought of that. I didn't even notice that yet, but I think you're right. Or, wow, I didn't know I was making you feel that way. That's great. You can probably get back to a healthy relationship. Okay. But if they're unwilling to listen, they're unwilling to have the conversation, or they blame or shame or make it seem like it's all their fault, that's when it's probably a good time to get out of a relationship. Going from an unhealthy to an abusive relationship can be a really fast thing, and it can get really dangerous really fast. It's best to get out of the relationship when you're at this unhealthy stage than having to try to get out once we get all the way to the abusive stage. So an abusive relationship is where one person is making all the decisions, including your sexual choices, who you spend time with, and boundaries. Okay. It's really important to talk about. You can't kind of lose yourself when you're in a relationship. It's important to keep doing things that are healthy and good for yourself, your mental health, your physical well-being, which include things like spending time with your friends and your family. I always say, whoever you're dating should not dictate who you can spend your time with and how much time or anything like that. They, of course, should not pressure or force sexual acts of any kind. And they should respect boundaries. If you have personal boundaries for your physical relationship, they should respect that. Or if you say, this is something that really puts me in emotional distress or makes me feel XYZ way. Of course, the teen is probably not going to say emotional distress, but makes me feel this way, or make them upset, whatever, that should be respected. And you should be able to have that conversation. I often tell teens and kind of encourage that once a teen is in an abusive relationship, they likely need help getting out. It likely will not be a seamless, safe thing for them to just exit the relationship. The most dangerous time in a abusive relationship is when one partner is trying to leave the relationship. It's a time where we need to make sure that we're protecting that teen. We need to make sure that we're aware of the situation and that there are safeguards in place for them physically, mentally, emotionally, electronically, all of the things. So I'm going to go through some signs of the different kinds of abuse, and then I'm going to stop for questions because I want to make sure we have enough time to just get everything answered that you have on your brain. So here are some signs of physical abuse. I think that this is what teens think of as physical abuse the most is physical abuse. But there are far other kinds of abuse and even more common kinds of abuse than physical. So biting, slapping, kicking, punching, shoving, pinching, throwing an object, blocking someone from leaving a room, using or threatening a weapon. I always say anything that affects your person, your body, your physical body, that is what physical abuse is. Signs of emotional abuse. So emotional abuse is far more common than physical abuse, and it's a little bit harder to identify. It can include things like bullying, stalking, yelling, shaming, name calling, put downs, ignoring, threats of harm, humiliation, isolation from friends and family. So especially in earlier stages of emotional abuse, this is often done behind closed doors or on the phone or through a text message or something like that. So it can be a little bit harder to identify the actual abuse. You can identify changes in your teen's behavior that can, kind of pique your interest and push you to maybe investigate a little more. Maybe, monitor their direct messages or their text messages, and you might be able to find some of this happening. As it progresses in time, typically emotional abuse then becomes a little bit more public. So you might see their dating partner bully them publicly or yell at them or shame them in front of their friends or something. And those are really big red flags. If they're willing to do that publicly, that means that it's likely much worse privately. Signs of sexual abuse. Pressuring, unwanted sexual acts, kissing, touching, hickeys, rape, unwanted marks, refusing birth control, coercion, spreading rumors, birth control sabotage. Anything that is non-consensual, that doesn't respect the boundaries that have been put in place. And just because, they'd agreed upon something at one point doesn't mean that it's just a blanket agreement for forever. We always want to encourage students that you can say, I'm no longer comfortable with that. Or even if you talked about, engaging in something and then it's the moment and you're feeling uncomfortable, that's okay. You can say, no, I'm no longer comfortable with this. And if someone pressures them, that is considered sexual abuse there. Electronic abuse. This is probably the most common kind of abuse that I see amongst teens right now. Things like repeat texting, repeat calling, location tracking, stalking, GPS tracking, demanding passwords, checking their phone, cyberbullying, blackmail of any kind, taking or distributing naked pictures. What I see most is like demanding to monitor text messages or direct messages, or when one partner gets up, the other one grabs their phone and goes through all of their content on their device. Repeated texting. They call it spamming. Where are you? What are you doing? That kind of thing. And then taking or distributing naked pictures and blackmail. We see this happen a lot of times when someone tries to leave a relationship. We'll see a naked picture get leaked. 1 in 4 teens will report to have engaged in sexting some point in their teenage years. 1 in 4. And so that leaves a lot of opportunity for pictures being leaked, messages being leaked. And it can be really dangerous. If your child experiences this, you do need to report it. And I'll put the best place to report it in the chat. And there's a couple resources that I can direct you to. If you feel like your kid's being cyberbullied anyway or blackmailed, and my biggest encouragement there is keep advocating. Keep advocating. Don't take no for an answer. If one law enforcement agency tells you, oh, there's nothing we can do about it at this time, go to the next one. And if you're still not getting the answers that you feel like you should be getting, again, please reach out to me. We have a lot of tricks up our sleeve. And it's really important to get those images and messages down off the internet. So here are some relationship red flags. If someone is extremely jealous or possessive, if they're unliked by many friends or family. And I always like to define this by saying it's not just necessarily like if your one best friend doesn't like the person that you're interested in, or your dad doesn't like the one person that you're interested in, and they never liked a single person that you're interested in. I always give the example of my husband and I were best friends for years. And my dad would always say, you should really date that Nick. He's a really good guy. And I'd be like, I'm not going to date that Nick. And then he would say, I'm going to hook him up with your sister. And we like always had this game. And then once we started dating, he was like, I don't like that Nick anymore. That's not what I'm talking about. Okay. We're talking about if multiple people are seeing things of concern. And what we tell kids is sometimes when you're interested in somebody, you're like that heart eye emoji. Okay. The emoji that just has hearts as their eyes. And it's like, you can't see anything because all you can see is how cute they are. Okay. And sometimes you need trusted people in your life, whether it be your friends or your family or sibling or whatever, to say, hey, I'm seeing a couple things that you might not be seeing. Okay. If they don't respect boundaries, if they make you feel uncomfortable in a bad way, if they make situations about their wants and needs without consideration for partners' wants or needs, if they call or text excessively, if they deny or dismiss wrongdoings when confronted, or pressure sexual acts in any way. Again, talk about these things. Talk about, hey, what would be red flags for you in a dating relationship? ask them what they think. That's really good to start dialogue about these things. Some green flags. Teens that can communicate effectively and civilly, wonderful. That is a green flag in general, but especially in a potential dating relationship. If there's mutual respect for boundaries, if boundaries can even be discussed. Talking about boundaries can be really hard for teens, whether it be emotionally or sexually or mentally. Even just saying, hey, this doesn't work for me is a huge step. And so we kind of like to help teens figure out what their boundaries are by saying, hey, what are some goals that you have and how would you get to those goals? Like, what things in your life would you need to be able to achieve your goal that you want in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years, in 50 years, whatever. And help them walk through what boundaries would be there for them, because their boundaries might be different than their friends' boundaries. And they might be different than what you would hope their boundaries are, but just helping them define that is wonderful. Can manage and discuss uncomfortable emotions such as anger and jealousy. Okay. And even saying like, hey, have you ever talked about jealousy with friends? Like, what do you think, or what makes you jealous? This is what makes me jealous. That kind of thing. Does not try to change their partner. We always tell kids, don't date someone because they're almost perfect. Okay. They're their own person and you are your own person. We shouldn't try to change each other. If they're fine with hanging out in groups around family members as well as alone. If that potential dating partner only ever wants to hang out alone, that can be a red flag. So with that said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, allow you guys to ask some questions, and I'm going to get a couple resources for you while we're doing that. Let's see. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat. I'm going to send you. Hold on. First of all, here's my email. If you ever need anything, please email me. And then I'm also going to put a link to our podcast because we talk about things like this on our podcast all the time. And just kind of like
Sydney, do you feel that parents could share this recording with their teenagers?
I feel it's okay. Mm-hmm. I think that's, of course, up to you.
We'll make this available tomorrow. And here's a question from Josephina. What kind of resources can we share with teenagers that have never dated?
That have never dated. I think, well, okay, I can put a couple resources in the chat, but I also think that it's important to talk about how it's fine to not have ever dated. That's a huge one. Sometimes kids feel like, or teens feel like there's something wrong with they've never dated. I think making sure that they know that there's nothing wrong with you for that. And then also just talking about, like I said earlier, what are their boundaries? What are their green flags for a relationship? What are their red flags for a relationship? And what are their like non-negotiables? Are there things that if they noticed in someone that they were thinking of potentially dating, that they would absolutely not date them because of XYZ? And then I'm going to put, we have some resources specifically for teens. And so I'm going to put the link to those in the chat. Give me just a second.
Sydney, have you had any experience with teenagers that might be slightly on the spectrum or kiddos that have a little bit of differences in how this impacts them?
Absolutely. So we've seen things like people who, at least from our experience, and again, everybody's different, but from our experience, it can be sometimes like oversharing sometimes, and really important for everyone, but especially for anyone who finds themselves to, relate to the world, to know what their boundaries are ahead of time and to learn how to verbalize that. And again, I think that comes with role playing with trusted adults. How do you communicate this? And how do you communicate this in a safe way, in a healthy way, and in a way that doesn't appear to be harmful to someone else? I've seen that happen as well, where someone thinks that they're just communicating what they need, and it comes off in a way that someone else thinks is inappropriate or harmful. And so really starting those dialogues, having those conversations. I like what if questions. What would you do if this happened? How would you say this to somebody? If you were interested in someone, how would you let them know? We've also seen that happen where either someone treats your child inappropriately, or they do something that someone else deems inappropriate, and really they were just trying to express their emotions. We have to talk through all things. What else?
Are there any books that you would suggest for teenagers to read about this, or to families to share in a family environment?
Books. No.
That's all right.
Not really. Not any that I love. I've read a few, and I'm
yeah,
I don't love them. There's maybe a chapter of a couple that I'm like, you could read this. There is a movie. What is it called? There's a movie called 8th Grade. It's a documentary that you can find on YouTube. Hold on, I'll get you the link. That kind of talks about a lot of this from just a standard 8th grader's perspective. And they actually have all the key players are true 8th graders. And the director says, the 8th graders would how am I supposed to act like an 8th grader? And the director would be like, just act how you act. I'm trying to learn from you. And it's the best one that I've seen that is realistic. I would suggest watching it with your teen. It is a little risque, but I think it's realistic of teenage years. So maybe screen it yourself first, but let me get you the video for that. I don't know. I haven't found good books for it yet. If anyone, I see one, Boundaries in Dating for Teens. It's a Christian book. It's not the one I was thinking of. I was like, I think I've read that. Boundaries and Dating for Teens. I mean, I've read the standard Boundaries book, which is also good. And it's a good one for you to read to help talk about how to create boundaries if you're interested in that. Oh, and then I was going to get you guys the link if your child's ever kind of cyberbullied or anything like that. Let me see. So you can call this phone number. Or you can go to Saber tip plan.
Very nice. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, anything else?
Well, Sydney, we certainly appreciate you spending this time with us. I know that your organization offers so many resources. I would really encourage everyone to pay attention, go to your events. I remember I attended one learning about apps on the phone and how there can be scary things there. So there's a lot you can offer.
Yes, and there's a lot on our YouTube channel as well. So here, actually, let me get you that. We have videos on teen dating violence, but also if you want to learn about all the hot safety tools for various social media platforms, you can learn that as well from our YouTube channel. I should make a list of all of these resources.
You know, I'm seeing that some of the chat is not going to everyone. It ended up going to some of the panelists. So how about if I'll copy and paste and send it in the follow-up email? No worries.
That would be great.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'll make sure everybody gets all of the comments and the recording as well.
Awesome. Thank you guys so
Well,
much.
this was wonderful. Thank you, Sydney. So we appreciate you sharing your email. I'm sure folks will be reaching out to you. Absolutely. And please look for the email with the recording. It'll probably go out in the morning to you. And we look forward to inviting you to more of these webinars. We're doing 2 or 3 things a week in our community, and we love supporting the ADDA community. So thank you so much. And I think we'll say good evening.
Good evening. Let me know if there's anything else I can ever do.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.